So during my presentations, there's always an opportunity for you to win prizes. So just out of interest, who likes to win prizes? Let me see your hand. Yeah, you're like me, I love free stuff. So there's going to be 3 opportunities. Now, if you don't know the answer to the question, that's not really a problem. We're all friends here now, we've been here all day. The most creative answer can also win, as well as the right answer. And one of the questions I actually don't know, so it's going to be the most creative answer. So, let's get started. So, a changing workforce requires a change in the way we communicate to them. Now, before we get into the presentation, I'm going to start off with the first question. Communications channels can be, this is the quiz question by the way, so it's prize time. Communications channels can be grouped into 3 categories. Name the 3 categories. Anyone? So if you think of communication channels, there's 3 different types of them. So anyone can name them? Digital. Sorry, no?
Face-to-face.
Face-to-face. Okay, but if you're grouping them together? Face-to-face.
Verbal.
Verbal, yes, that's one.
Visual.
Visual, yes, and there's another one.
Audio.
Written. Okay, so that's 3. So anybody know all 3? Would anyone like to pretend that they didn't hear? And anyone know, what are the three things? Anyone?
Visual.
Yes, lady there?
Verbal, visual, and written.
Round of applause. Amazing. Please come and collect your prize. So, what are some of the, thank you, what are some of the ways in which the workforce has changed? Where's my clicky thing? Yes. What are some of the ways in which the workforce have changed? So if you think of 20, 30, 40 years ago, those of you who may or may not know, but I mean, I'm sure you can guess. What are some of the ways in which traditionally workforces were a certain way, but today they have changed? What are some of the kind of... Digitization, yes.
Job for life.
Job for life, definitely.
Remote working.
Pardon?
Remote working.
Remote working. Millennials, okay.
Command and control.
Command and control. It's very, very different today. So the workforce is not the same as it used to be back in the day. And these are some of the ones that I've looked at, that I pulled out. Flexi time, job share, working from home, hot desk environment, multiple offices, national travel, international travel, social media, computers, laptops, company mobile, intranet, Skype, paperless environment, that it goes on, because technology, the law, and many different things have had an impact on the workforce, and that workforce has changed. So the way in which we communicate with our staff also has to change, because it's not the same workforce that it used to be in the past. So, what are the ways in which we can do that? Later on in my presentation, I'm going to give you a couple of case studies, because I worked for 5 years for Balfour Beatty, and after that I did freelancing and consultancy for many, many different large organizations. So I'm going to share with you 2 case studies on how using new ways of communicating with people. So we have all these different ways, and there's also the different ways in which we can communicate with them. So now, bearing in mind all of these, what are some of the kind of newer ways in which we communicate with people today that we didn't in the past?
Instant messaging.
Instant messaging, definitely.
Video streaming.
Media streaming, yes. The intranet, social media. There's many, many different ways nowadays that we use. But what I've found is when I've gone around to different organizations, some are very traditional and some have kind of used a mixture of traditional and new methods, and some are kind of way ahead. But there's still, for me, going around to different organizations, are a lot that are a little too traditional, and it doesn't quite match the needs of the workforce. Bearing in mind that these days not everyone works at a computer. We've heard it many times today about remote workers or non-desk or offline workers. It's about including everyone in the organization and also using modern technology, because depending on the age group of your employee, there's certain expectations that an employee would engage with easier or would expect to be in place because of their age and their background and what sort of technology era they were born into. So that's really important to bear in mind for your workforce. So what are some of those? There's face-to-face. The old-fashioned traditional ones are face-to-face, the paper memo, the phone, the letter, and the telegram, and so forth. But if you look across the top, face-to-face is always the #1 and most effective form of communication. I was given the task by an HR, my boss at the time was the HR director. He said, we're going to make 800 people redundant and I need you to work with the HR manager who's going to do that. So she said to me, what can I do? Because I'm really dreading this. What's the best way? Should we send an email? Should we, I said, no, I said to her, call everybody together, be totally honest and do it face to face and tell them. Don't just send out a letter and so forth, particularly as all these people don't work at the same time. You don't want some to know and some not to know. Do it face to face. At least they can see what you're saying, they can see the expression on your face. If you're sorry about it, they'll be able to see it instead of just a letter saying, well, we regret, bye-bye, you're going to be redundant before Christmas. So face to face is always the #1. New ones, video is always a really great one because a lot of people these days engage with video. Social media, as we heard a lot about Yammer today, SMS text messaging, apps, CEO brown bag lunch meetings, all of these different ways of communicating with staff are very effective. But obviously you need to have a good mixture and know when to use them and when's best not to use them and so forth. So before I go on to my next one, our next opportunity for you to win a prize is a very simple question. Hands up if you've never won a prize ever in your life. Never won a prize, or never won the sort of prize that you would like to win. Okay. A round of applause. Okay, so I'm now going to go to my 2 case studies. I worked for a while, for 5 years, for Balfour Beatty Rail. Now, when I went in as the head of internal comms for Balfour Beatty Rail, what had happened prior to me arriving is that there were a number of companies owned by Balfour Beatty that were rail-type companies, but they weren't all brought together as one company. So what they decided to do is bring those companies together, call them Balfour Beatty Rail, and then divide the comms, so one person would do the external comms and one person would do the internal comms. So they brought me in because I was already working for Balfour Beatty Civil Engineering, so they moved me across into Balfour Beatty Rail. I was faced with, well, a number of challenges when I went into the organisation, because obviously it's all these different companies that have come together. There was lots of silos, there was lots of complaints, there was lots of different things, challenges that I had to basically face head on. So they kind of threw me in at the deep end, which I didn't realise at the time, but now obviously it's made me a lot stronger. So the main challenge, one of the main challenges I had was the silos. So to give you an example, Dean and Dymore was bought out by Burst Rail, and Burst Rail was bought out by Balfour Beatty Rail, yet people in the organisation, in spite of their payslips saying they worked for Balfour Beatty Rail, will tell you categorically, I work for Dean and Dymore. Now that company no longer exists, but that caused a problem because they said, oh, the Balfour Beatty people are over there, oh, and this is the Dean and Dymore section. And it was crazy because you think, well, that company doesn't exist anymore. So that was one of the main challenges I had going in, trying to cope with the mindset that people had. And also they were spread out. It was 14 offices and depots spread out nationwide across the UK, and also 6 countries across the globe, including Chile. So some were long haul, some were short haul, so there's different languages, different forms of technology. It was quite interesting. In addition to that, not everybody sat at a computer, because being Balfour Beatty Rail, there was a significant number of people who worked on the actual train track. So again, they don't have a company mobile, they don't have a company email address, they may come into a company building and there may be a notice board, but the question was, how do you communicate with these people? So my challenge was, how am I going to speak to these people when we haven't actually given them a way for us to communicate with them? And it's an age-old problem that many people have had. So this is one of the ways in which I coped with that particular situation. First of all, I spoke to the staff and said, what's the biggest challenges with regards to communication? So I ran a diagonal slice survey and said, what's your main problem when it comes to communication? And got as much feedback. I ran focus groups. I did site visits to almost all of the 14 offices and depots, went overseas, did as much face-to-face as I possibly could to get the information straight from the people. I wanted to hear what they had to say and give them an opportunity to talk to me, to say, this is the problem that we're having with regards to communication. It was quite eye-opening to hear all of their different versions, but there was a common thread running through. They felt like we didn't have a way that we could hear about what's going on, no one's talking to us and so forth. So I had to come up with some innovative ways in which to communicate with them. So one of the things, I did three things, three main things. I introduced payslip messages because every single person in an organization, I think bar maybe one, will read their payslip, no matter what. Everyone wants to see their payslip. Now, where I worked, there was a section on there with almost as many characters as you could tweet, 140 characters or however many, where you could put a message. So that worked effectively because every single person in the organization gets paid. So they will see that message. Now I had to be careful, you can't just send out any and anything on the payslip message. It had to be something that's important, that they had to know about it, and it was important that they were told it at a particular time. So that worked really well, because whenever anything went onto the payslip message, the first thing people started to think is, this is important, I must make sure I make note of what's been said here. So it can't be just anything that's sent out. Not everybody, but a lot of people in the organization had mobile phones. So I used that technology to send out text messages to people. Again, you can't overuse it, and not everyone has a company mobile. But some people who didn't have a company mobile were more than happy to have their personal mobile put onto the distribution list. Not everyone, some were not interested in that at all, but some said, oh no, I don't mind, I'd like to know what's going on. So that worked really well, because the statistics show that 90-something% of people will respond or at least read their text messaging on their phone. So that worked really well. So whenever we sent out a text message to people, if we wanted them to respond, that was really effective. The only challenge there is obviously not everybody has a mobile phone. And then there was video. Now, going into Balfour Beatty, the video wasn't a popular thing that was used. It was used, but not very much, and it wasn't something that was considered the best thing to spend money on. The videos weren't as polished as they could be. They're not bad, but not as good as they could be. So bearing in mind that people were spread out across the world and across the country, I decided to use video to engage in different key messages. One of them was sustainability. Now the challenge was, when you're talking about certain subjects, people are not interested, but using video and being a bit creative with it, that was really helpful in getting the message across to people, because I did a survey after we did the campaign with regards to sustainability. The strapline I came up with was, spend wise, help others, be green. And after I did the got the feedback from the different groups around the organisation. When I went out to the guys on the track and I said, do you remember about the video that you saw on sustainability? There was a resounding spend wise, help others be green. So that was really, really helpful. They liked the video. The video was a little bit controversial because I said to the sustainability manager, we can go old school, normal, run-of-the-mill video, or we can do animation, or we can just go right out there and do it in kind of the style of a music video. And he said, yeah, let's go for that one. Everyone will be talking about it. The CEO didn't like it that much, but he said everyone's talking about sustainability because of this particular video and because of the style. It worked in that situation. So reaching people from all different backgrounds was really good. We also put the video onto some DVDs, and those were sent to people who were off on maternity leave or were on sabbaticals and so forth as well. So there was like a little DVD that people could get as well. So that worked really well in Balfour Beatty Rail in terms of reaching the workforce and moving with the time, because the workforce, a lot of people there works there, they call it working there from boy to man, so it's the first job they ever had and they're still working there and they're about to retire, but they're not necessarily sat at a computer. There was a lot of complex things that I had to take into consideration about the way the workforce has changed. Even though they liked a lot of the traditional ways, they said, oh, we like the podcasts, we want to keep those and things like that. It's just helping them to understand the technology is here to help you absorb the information easier, so just try to bear that in mind. And the second one, my second case study, is I worked for King's College Hospital as a consultant, not a medical consultant, internal comms consultant. And that was kind of an unusual situation for me because I'd never worked in a hospital before and I'd never done internal comms in a hospital before. And the challenge they had is we struggled to communicate with nurses and doctors and pharmacists and porters and all the different people not necessarily based at a computer. So I had to do some research. I put my kind of personal things aside, because I'm not the best when it comes to hospital, and I just thought, right, I've just got to go for this. So I shadowed some nurses on different shifts, some early in the morning, some during the day, some at night, to get an understanding of what is it like to work as this person. So I followed them around for the day and said, okay, if I'm going to get a message to you, how do you usually get the key message or the communication? And I could see what the problem was, because if they just say to me, well, if it's on the notice board, I haven't got time to read it, my response would be, well, of course you could if you wanted to. But then having shadowed the nurse myself, I then realized not all the wards have a notice board. Not all the nurses, sometimes you may come onto the ward and be faced immediately with an emergency which kind of monopolizes the whole of their shift. Nurses have a lot of stuff that they need to do. It's a very pressurized environment, and if I hadn't gone and kind of shadowed them, I wouldn't have really understood. I did it the same with the doctors, I did it with the porters as well. I didn't realize what it's like. Also, it's a 24/7 environment, and the customer, so to speak, is right there. It's not like you work in this office and your customers are somewhere else. They're right in front of you. So that, for me, again, was a bit unusual. So how do you communicate with the workforce, again, when the customer is right there, when they work all kinds of different hours, there isn't necessarily the right communication channels in place. So I did some research and I spoke to somebody from the Birmingham Children's Hospital, and she spoke to me about an app that they had created for their staff, and she told me the feedback of how it worked really well. Now, in King's College Hospital, not everybody has a company mobile, but most people have a smartphone, and they do actually understand that it is difficult when they're trying to get message and information about what's going on. So they really wanted to be a part of, internal comms and get to know what is going on. So many people signed up. I wasn't there for when they actually implemented it, I just did all the work leading up to it. But many people were really interested in it, and from what I heard afterwards, it's gone down very well with the people there. So that's my kind of 2 case studies on using different forms of communication for a changing workforce. One of the ways to kind of get some information on what may work or may not work is sometimes it's just to ask people, say, this is a list of the different ones that we could implement that we haven't as yet. Which ones do you think would perhaps work best? So that's what I did, and I hope that was helpful. So I'm running out of time, so any questions?
We do have a few minutes for questions, if anybody has any. Yeah.
Can
I just ask, you mentioned that with BT Rail, some of the employees wouldn't acknowledge or just didn't want to know that they were actually now working for that company. So the channels that you talked about were great for short, sharp messages, but how did you overcome that problem with the channels that you had?
What I had to do is, I met with my CEO and I explained the problem to him, and how I kind of got him to understand it was to say, it's a bit like opal fruits and starburst. It's the same thing, but it now has a new name. So he said, oh right, show me the opal fruit people. I was going to say to him. So I said, well, it's to help them to understand that it's not that we appreciate your loyalty and it's great that you really embrace this company, but we're now one big family. So I created a video, Better Together as One, and it showed kind of the little icons of all the old companies, and it merged together into one Balfour Beatty Rail, saying, we know you love these companies and you're really loyal, but you're now part of one bigger family and you're now called Balfour Beatty Rail. That worked really well, because when people could kind of visualize it, that it's not that we've kind of done away with it, we've just embraced them into a new company, that helped. It didn't happen overnight, and I had to basically get line managers to kind of really encourage people to say, you now work for Balfour Beatty Rail. Kind of thing. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes. One more question? Yes.
I'm not quite sure what my question is, but I was just really interested in your statement when you said, I was shadowing the nurses and you realise they don't have time. So how did you, was it just feedback or a general flavour from staff that that was the right way to go? I'm just, in my head, I'm wrestling with the idea of what's the difference between pulling up an app on your phone and going to a notice board. I know there's obviously a difference, but in terms of time,
The app can come with you, the notice board can't. That's kind of the main thing. I thought that as well. The notice boards, again, they're not uniform, so depending on the layout of the ward, it may be in an obvious place, it may be in a non-obvious place, it may have 50 million things on it, and some are from 1902, so it just depends. But it works well because they can actually go home and look at it, whereas if the notice board is at work, it doesn't.
yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Suzanne.
Okay, I have one last
One
prize.
prize.
Who would like a prize?
There we go.
Round of
Let's take
applause.
those. Okay, final session now. I'm really interested in this one because I'm living it at the moment in my day job. So we're going to hear from Sian and Gisela about how they, at scale, engaged associates with a new business strategy. So let's hear. Is that right?
Engagement strategy.
Engagement
not
strategy.
business
Engagement
That's
strategy.
next.
That's next, okay.
Yeah.
Engage people, first of all, absolutely.
Engage them in engagement.
Okay, do you need the clicker?
Yes, please.
There you go.
Hello, everyone, or everyone that's left. Thank you for sticking around.